How does the GT3 racing in Assetto Corsa Competizione with low fuel motorsport compare to the GT3 racing in iRacing? That is what we're going to be talking about in this video. Before I continue, I'd like to thank all our channel members, all the people that subscribe and do all the annoying YouTube stuff. Also, a big thanks to people that use our Amazon and Fanatec affiliate links in the description. Without you guys, the channel wouldn't be viable. So thank you very much. Let's dive into this topic. So for those of you that hate YouTube videos that go on forever without answering the question, the fact of the matter is the GT3 racing in ACC is just on another level to iRacing. There's a multitude of reasons for this, but I think one of the biggest reasons that ACC captures real GT3 cars better than iRacing does, and the racing ends up being more reflective of what you'd see in a real GT3 race, is the fact that the vehicles are much more responsive to driver input, and the tyres in ACC are much less prone to getting stuck in long protracted slides and situations where you are a passenger. In short, the cars in ACC drive like you would expect a vehicle that's been designed to enable wealthy people to take part in motorsport. People that haven't gone through loads of go-karting and formula training, people that just want to do race driving in a nice, fancy, luxurious race vehicle. When playing iRacing GT3 cars, which I'll admit I have actually had a lot of fun racing them, a huge number of incidents are from a mild lockup causing someone to then just continue sliding forever into the rest of the grid, or a slight bit of oversteer causing them to fire off the circuit, or a little tap of the grass causing them to do a 360 no-scope into the entire field. There's just so much erratic variability to what occurs in iRacing, specifically from the nature of how the tyres are and how unforgiving they are. It makes it really, really likely that there's going to be mental accidents in most races. And even when you've got reasonably good at massively underdriving to get the most out of iRacing's tyre model, you will find that the erratic crashes that happen around you, so many of them are completely unavoidable and will then just wreck you and ruin your race. In contrast, obviously people do dumb things in ACC, obviously people still spin on the grass, there's still accidents, but you will find the accidents that do occur are from really big mistakes or really new drivers or people driving with a gamepad, you know, people that are massively messing things up. But crucially, you can actually avoid a lot of those accidents a lot easier than you can in iRacing, because you're not going to accidentally, when Twitch reacted to a crashing, push your tyres into superheated slop state that you can't do anything with. Additionally, having grass that allows the car to not behave like the International Space Station orbiting the planet with seemingly negative grip, and actually having the grass have a little bit of grip, means that you can again use the grass to avoid accidents. It's not ideal, it doesn't always work, but it doesn't mean you're going to very likely slide across the grass into the barrier and be race over, or slide across the grass into the cars. It's much, much less likely to happen. Still does happen sometimes, but it's just, again, the whole thing is way more forgiving, and I personally think forgiving in a much more realistic way. Though I'm sure those of you with Stockholm Syndrome will say that it's not. I think the best way to characterise iRacing's tyres and general handling nature is it's the worst case real world scenario. It captures what would be the absolute worst case real world scenario. Oh, you've gone to the track with the wrong tyre pressures. Oh, you've put wets on and you're driving in the dry. Oh, it's just the grass is frozen and it's downhill cambered and you've gone on it, and so you're sliding forever. iRacing is the worst case scenario every single time, pretty much the worst case scenario. Whereas in ACC, when stuff happens and you're sliding or balancing the car limit or doing all these things, it's more like a sort of average case scenario of what you'd probably expect from a real world GT3 car. Some cases it's a little bit more forgiving, other cases it's a little bit less forgiving, but on balance I think it's generally how the tyres are probably what you'd expect from a real GT3 car, which then, as I say, makes the racing much more conducive to being realistic, much less like playing Wii bowling, and a lot less requiring of you to memorize this huge list of preemptive things to be aware of with the simulator before you can have a basically enjoyable race or not be massively frustrated by the sim. Now, that all sounded very bitter towards iRacing, so in fairness, let me say there are some weird things with ACC's tyres. For example, as you start to get a bit faster, you do notice that the cars get stuck in these little micro slides, which are really annoying, and you kind of just have to wait for them to finish. They don't cause you to crash, but they don't feel natural at all. And you'll also find when you hit the certain curbing or some of the chicanes, when the car is really compressing the suspension, or you're really leaning on the suspension, especially with tighter setups, the cars do kind of flop around in weird ways. Also, corners like the like Schumacher S's or Eau Rouge, for example, the cars really, in my view, don't seem particularly natural through those types of corners. So ACC is not perfect in its tyre model or how the physics operate, but in totality, from an overview, the average race that results from the nature of its handling and physics, at worst, is much more enjoyable and much less frustrating, and at best I think is genuinely much closer to the reality of what you see with GT3 racing, based off GT3 races that I've watched on telly. Now, putting aside physics, I will say as well, a huge component of what helps with ACC is the netcode. Now, there's this bizarre meme that iRacing has the world's best netcode. It's so good and smooth. And it's like, visually, iRacing's netcode looks fantastic. But even with GT3 cars, which are relatively slow compared to, obviously, faster Formula cars, there's so many invisible ghost contacts and hits, which then cause the cars to erratically pinball off. It's absurd. It's like every other race, there's some crazy ghost contact or super weird netcode pinballing in iRacing. ACC's netcode isn't perfect. You do get rowboating, which can be difficult to work out with cars that are rowboating badly. It's like a GT3 Oxford Cambridge boat race at times. It's not perfect, but for the most part, when there are contacts in ACC, they have to be quite aggressive contacts to really cause a car to fly off in most cases. The only thing that ACC is particularly sensitive to is if you are on a very slow corner and the car behind taps the car in front on the back, then the car will just rotate instantly, which is really annoying. Sometimes I think that's realistic as well, though. Like in the recent Bathurst race, there were actually incidents where a car behind just tapped the car in front very gently and it rotated it. It probably takes away the downforce and affects the suspension and everything. That same sort of tap also happens in iRacing as well, so that might just be a realistic thing. But generally, the car contacts in ACC and the nature of that with the netcode is so much better than iRacing. Again, it's absurd. Like it's almost ridiculous to compare them. The only time where I think iRacing really wins out on netcode is if you are in the land of the kangaroos and then you're trying to race with someone in the land of teabags. You can still have something that looks smooth, and as long as you don't contact and as long as you stay away from each other a few meters away, it can visually look okay and you can have a race. Whereas with ACC, once you get above the sort of 300 ping, it really, the rowboating really does make it sort of unplayable. But for the vast majority of racing that you're having, and normally you're going to be racing people in a similar time zone to yourself. Sorry, not necessarily for the people in the land of kangaroos. I understand they're a unique situation. But for people in the UK, Europe, or people in America, they're normally going to be racing their time zone with enough people in their time zone to race against. In that scenario, the netcode in ACC just absolutely destroys iRacing. Not visually, though. Not visually. So when it comes to broadcasts and looking at it, it doesn't look as good. But in reality, in terms of how the netcode affects gameplay, ACC's netcode is just much more honest and easier to then drive around and much less likely to cause mental crashes with. Again, neither are perfect, but ACC's is just on another level, and I think there's this weird meme and myth that iRacing has amazing netcode, mostly based off the superficial nature of how it looks rather than the reality of actually using it. Moving on to the topic of content, ACC has more GT3 cars to pick from, and you don't have to buy them individually. So, I mean, it's laughable. It's like £11 for each car in iRacing, plus a track fee, plus a subscription fee. It's actually it's pretty much a joke, really. If you compare it to any other driving game, racing simulator, or pretty much anything other than train simulator, it's actually pretty crazy, really. Again, even I sort of get in the Stockholm syndrome of going, oh, well, that's reasonable. It's like, really, it isn't, actually. You know, you can still get value from it. That's fine. But, come on, let's look at things within the context of it. I've got value from iRacing. I have enjoyed it. So on a capitalist level, great, it's made money. But on a objective, what's available to everyone in the context of racing simulators, it is patently absurd. Now, obviously, because the cars cost so much in iRacing and they're laser scanned and built pixel by pixel by an army of the most talented people on Earth, the iRacing cars are more realistic than the ACC car. Oh, no, hang on. I think you could equally say that the cars, in terms of the actual car details, the differences between the vehicles and the nature of the cars between each other, I think you can say it's pretty balanced. Or, you know, I don't nitpick on these car specifics because I don't know. I think that is something where you actually do need to drive the real car to go, well, that specific car tends to do this and that does that. So that's why I tend to just complain about tyre model, suspension and stuff and, you know, the broader physics engine. But I would say, from my limited perspective, the different cars in ACC seem as good as the different cars in iRacing. So, you know, it's I think with ACC you just have to give them huge credit for the sheer number of vehicles there that all handle differently and allow you to find something that you might like. And then with low fuel motorsport, you can drive those in the races and choose different cars and have a good time of it. So the content, I mean, it's pretty obvious who wins that. On to the next thing. Let's be nice to iRacing because they've got blood all over their face. The general online structure of iRacing is actually better done. You do have to pay for it. Low fuel motorsports is basically free, but the overall structure of iRacing, stuff like driver swaps, is really well done in iRacing. That's absolutely fantastic. The stuff like your driver rating and the how you can see how you've progressed, all those sorts of overarching sim features, the structural components of iRacing are much better than ACC, and better than most sims, to be honest. So iRacing absolutely nails that, and I definitely would say I think iRacing is the pinnacle simulator for just about everything that isn't the actual car handling, so or the racing. So credit to iRacing for that. You can't. ACC doesn't come close on that. I've got to mention force feedback. All I'll say is I think both iRacing and ACC have terrible force feedback in terms of actually being able to feel where the tyres are at the limit. I do think GT3 cars are particularly bad in any simulator due to the nature of GT3 cars. Peaky tyres, they're quite pokey, but they're also heavy cars. They're not going to be the best cars for getting force feedback through a wheel anyway, in reality. But go and drive a GT3 car in AMS2, R-Factor 2, AC1. The force feedback's just on another level in those simulators for the experience of feeling what the car's doing and then driving from that. But yeah, both iRacing and ACC have absolutely terrible force feedback. So they're equally awful in that regard. Merry Christmas to iRacing, because again I'm going to say a positive where iRacing actually does beat out ACC. If you want to do GT3 racing mixed class, obviously that's not in ACC at all. And the IMSA series, for example, driving GT3 with LMP1, LMP2, that's a really good, interesting experience and something you just can't get in ACC. So it's not pure GT3 driving, but if you like GT3 cars, as an experience of something you can do in a GT3 car, that is really good. And then obviously the big events they do. So I recently did the 24 hours of Daytona, and it was awful because of the handling, but the actual event was great. The doing stuff with the team was great. iRacing really, again, does a really good job on those mixed class, lots of people in something type situation. So credit to iRacing there. And I think that's where, if you're paying the money for iRacing, that's where you probably get more of the value from it. Oh dear God, I've got another positive for iRacing. It's swinging around. This video started off as, comes across as a real iRacing hater video. But now we're moving away from handling. Like VR, the graphics and how it all runs, iRacing runs way better than ACC. Now, look, granted, ACC has, as you can see here, rain and dynamic track and much not. Well, I don't really like how Unreal Engine looks, but a lot of people would say it looks nice. It's more advanced lighting, stuff I don't care about. I actually prefer how iRacing looks for the most part. It's very functional. Your frame rates are generally better. You don't need an IBM mainframe or a Cray supercomputer. These supercomputer analogies are actually useless to probably most people watching this video who were born after the 1930s. Those were fast computers back in the day. You could probably, those computers would fit in a watch now. I hate that analogy. Oh, they landed on the moon with the equivalent of a Casio wristwatch. No, they didn't. Those computers they used were incredible. Knitted RAM. Anyway, we're getting off topic. Go and watch some stuff on the Apollo computers. It's amazing. It's fascinating. But yeah, you don't need a really fast computer to run iRacing and to have it still work really well. ACC is a right chore to get to work. It's improved over time. It does have all this because of its Unreal Engine. It does do day-night really nicely. It does do weather really nicely. But I drive with the mirror turned off to get a higher frame rate, and that's with a 3080 Ti. I am playing at 4K resolution, but iRacing generally just runs better than ACC does. So credit to iRacing. VR and general performance is a lot better in iRacing. So ultimately, we've reached the end of this video, and you've reached the end of your tether. And hopefully you're close to the ground, otherwise reaching the end of the tether is not a good thing. Right. Why can't iRacing just have some kind of barely reasonable tyre model like AC, AMS1, R Factor 2, and, then it'd be fine. Then it'd be amazing. As it is, though, ACC does GT3 in totality much cheaper, much better value for money. That's what cheaper means. More accessibly. Low Fuel Motorsports is absolutely incredible. Go and sign up to Low Fuel Motorsports. Go and do the racing on there. I got a little bit addicted to it, and that's as someone that's not the biggest fan of ACC. As you guys know, I'm an AMS1, Richard Burns Rally, and Assetto Corsa fanboy. I quite like Race Room as well. I'm not an ACC fanboy. Many people... I've actually literally received threats to my existence from fanboys of ACC. So, we are actually quite critical of this title. But Aris bought me a beer. Well, a Coke, because I don't drink. So maybe that was enough to turn me positive, and I've swayed, and you can't trust anything. You can't trust any of you. Don't trust no one. That's the end of this video. Thank you for watching this. Until the next one, let me know if you want more rants, and if this was useful to you. Let's have some delightful comments in the comment section where people strawman and completely ignore any actual points made. That's what the internet is for. Till the next one, happy tea drinking, take care, don't get run over by a bus, and goodbye.